Or maybe when they constantly hear on the airways people like you and Hillary Clinton and others constantly depicting Trump as an existential threat to democracy and America.
Piers, you're totally guilty. You're guilty. You're guilty. Because you support Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has done 2,000 times worse, and you know it. You won't even run it on this show.
Okay.
You won't even run it on this show because Donald Trump, what he says is so much worse than anything a Democrat has ever said about him. So you won't even run it on this show.
If we were to rank the public figures suffering from an extreme case of Trump Derangement Syndrome, Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks would easily land in the top 10. In this video, Candace Owens takes him head on, calmly dismantling his arguments about Trump and the recent assassination attempt. Let me give you some context before we start the clip, as we're jumping into the middle of the conversation since it goes on for quite a while. Cenk refuses to acknowledge any responsibility for the violent rhetoric coming from liberals and instead insists that Trump is exponentially worse. He's not budging on that claim, but here's the kicker. Piers Morgan isn't having it, and just wait until you hear Candace Owens' response. Let's dive in.
Or maybe when they constantly hear on the airways people like you and Hillary Clinton and others constantly depicting Trump as an existential threat to democracy and America.
Piers, you're totally guilty. You're guilty. You're guilty. Because you support Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has done 2,000 times worse, and you know it. You won't even run it on this show.
Okay.
You won't even run it on this show because Donald Trump, what he says is so much worse than anything a Democrat has ever said about him. So you won't even run it on this show. So that's it. Are you telling Donald Trump, you better shut up? You better not say any of those gross things that you always say. You know that he joked about smashing Nancy Pelosi's husband's head in with a hammer.
Yeah, and the truth
One
is,
of his lunatic fans tried to murder Nancy Pelosi's husband, and he's like, it's so funny. Do you know that when they try to murder his vice president, he then turned around and said he deserved it? He's a psycho, and you defend him every day, Piers.
Here's the problem. You have no idea what I've said about Trump when he's done these things. If you had, you wouldn't accuse me of not talking about them, because I always do.
Shut up?
Because I always do.
Are you telling him to shut up?
Let's pause for a moment. Cenk Uygur has an extreme case of Trump Derangement Syndrome, and I honestly don't think he'll ever get over it. He's proud of his progressive views, which is what the Young Turks is all about. The only person who occasionally makes sense there is Ana Kasparian, who sometimes says things that are just basic common sense. But Cenk? I rarely hear anything reasonable from him, especially when it comes to Trump. Here's the issue. Two wrongs don't make a right. Even if we agree with Cenk that Trump's words might have contributed to another attempt on his life, can't Cenk at least acknowledge that his own rhetoric also plays a role in this toxic environment? I doubt it, because Cenk acts exactly like what he accuses Trump of being, emotional and out of control. It's like he has a personal vendetta, as if Trump bullied him in high school, and now he's on a mission to get revenge. He's too emotional to have a balanced conversation. The point of this video and why it matters is because Candace Owens shows us how to handle these kinds of arguments. She breaks down the facts calmly, and we could all learn something from the way she deals with Cenk's meltdown. Let's continue.
Candace, look, we're 48 hours after the latest assassination attempt, and I'm listening to another liberal who I respect, I've had Cenk on a lot on the show, absolutely losing his mind about how despicable Donald Trump is and what a threat he is and a danger and so on and so on. Exactly the kind of rhetoric that Trump has said he believes is fueling these people to try and kill him. What do you make of where we are with this?
What I make of all of this is that if you are going to legitimately tell people that someone is a monster, that somebody is a dictator, that somebody is literally Adolf Hitler, if you're going to tell people that this person is a constant threat, why wouldn't somebody try to eliminate that threat? That would actually be a sensible thing for somebody to do if they believe the rhetoric that is coming out of people's mouths. Now,
then
if this had happened and it was flipped,
including you, Candace.
Cenk, you just spoke for a very long time.
Let Candace finish, please.
Let Candace speak. Cenk, you're going to have to learn how to control yourself. I know it's very difficult for you, but you just had a very long time to speak and we were quiet. I promise you can do that. You need to sit on your hands, then you should do that. As I was saying, if this situation had been reversed and I had just watched somebody try to shoot Kamala Harris, I would be definitively saying how wrong it was. I would be saying to people that despite the fact that I do not want her to be president, of course, she is not so much of a threat that she needs to be shot. They don't stop this rhetoric because they do not want these assassination attempts to stop on Donald Trump. And I want to be very clear. The circumstance that we find ourselves in the West is one of remarkable privilege. And when you're in times of remarkable privilege, it creates actually an issue of having a lot of weak men, right? Weak men are the ones that are going out here
Like
proclaiming that Donald Trump is a threat, proclaiming that Donald Trump is somebody that is a dictator because they've never had real conflict in their lives. And you're about to see that example right now, the difference in the demeanor between someone like Cenk and Eric Prince, who I greatly respect, and who is somebody who has seen real conflict and understands what real threat is, right? He understands real threat. Cenk is somebody that grew up, obviously, with a silver spoon in his mouth. He's never had to fight for anything in his life and has never had to put his life before somebody else's. So it's very easy for him to behave like this, to behave demonstrably like a toddler who is throwing his toys out of the pram when he doesn't get what he wants. And so he heightens his rhetoric and says, why am I not getting what I want? This man's a dictator. This man's a threat. And he's not being realistic. And it's embarrassing to our country, whether it was a person on the right or the left.
You guys haven't addressed it at all.
Cenk, I promise you are capable of
He wants to
controlling
terminate the
yourself
Constitution,
for
so you
3
like that?
minutes as somebody else speaks.
There's a lot to break down here, so let's tackle it one step at a time. First off, staying calm and collected, like Candace Owens, is key when dealing with someone as Trump deranged as Cenk Uygur. You're not going to convince someone who's not thinking rationally or being open-minded. Candace made an excellent point. If you're constantly calling someone a threat, it's bound to escalate tensions. If someone took the time to count how often Democrats have said threat to democracy versus how many times Trump has said it, I'm sure the Democrats would come out way ahead. We live in a time where words matter more than ever, and people are reacting to that emotionally, just like Cenk. Here's another thing. There are countless threats that get stopped before they even happen. Political violence isn't one-sided. It happens on both sides, no doubt, but the most recent would-be assassin clearly supported Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. His truck had a Biden-Harris sticker, and he posted multiple times about hating Trump, even writing a book where he insulted Trump. So, while you might argue that some other attempts, like in Butler, Pennsylvania, didn't have clear political motives, this one definitely did. The fact is, there have been 2, possibly 3 attempts on Trump's life. You could count the Arizona border incident too, but no one has tried to take out Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. That shows just how far people are willing to go when it comes to Trump and how the left-wing media's rhetoric contributes to that. So the real question is, why don't Democrats dial it back and take some responsibility? Why are they so unwilling to step up? I was watching Chris Cuomo and Bill O'Reilly earlier, and their take on this made a lot of sense. Let's take a quick look at that.
Do you think the Democrats are missing an opportunity by jumping on the political violence that has targeted Trump and trying to claim high ground of, it doesn't matter what he says, you can't do this, and we are not like him, and anybody who goes after him is the worst of it, like really talking about it a lot. They've only said the perfunctory things. I know they made phone calls, that's fine, but they're talking about a lot of other things a lot more than the violence that's been directed towards him. I guess because they think it's bad for them. I see it the opposite way.
Well, it's always been that way since John Adams and Thomas Jefferson went after each other in the second, third presidential race, but Washington had no opponent. So it's always been that way. You'll see it in confronting the presidents. Every campaign is dirty, some dirtier than others. But the Democrats believe that Donald Trump's personality will lead them to victory. So they're going to hit that. I don't have any problem with that, by the way. I don't have any problem as long as they don't call him Hitler, as long as they don't lie about him and saying that he's going to be a dictator on day one, which is an absolute lie. Everybody knows he said that in conjunction with executive orders, and it was just an off-the-cuff remark. I don't like the lying, but I don't mind the policy. I mean, that's what we should be having here. I'd rather have it on issues, but remember, the main issue for Kamala Harris is that Trump's the devil. That's the number one issue. She's got no solutions to anything. We saw it again yesterday in Philadelphia, where a journalist there, the black journalist, said, okay, Gaza, Israel, what are you going to do? And she goes, we need to get a ceasefire. Okay, everybody knows that. How would you go about it? And then she'll tell you about her middle-class upbringing. It's absurd. It's exactly what Warren Harding did, Cuomo. And Warren Harding got elected. He's one of the worst presidents of all time because American voters knew nothing about him. And he got elected because he wouldn't give interviews. He wouldn't talk to anybody. I don't know if Kamala's campaign has read confronting the presidents, but it's exactly the same. 1920, Warren Harding.
History repeats itself, right?
All right, here are my final points on this topic because it's been a big discussion since the second assassination attempt. First, when you're in the heat of a campaign, is it okay to say some of the things we've been hearing? Personally, I think everything's fair game, but some words should be off limits, like threat, Hitler, or eliminate. Not in terms of policy, but when you say Trump needs to be eliminated. If someone reasonable were in charge of messaging, they'd probably avoid using words like that if they wanted to lower the temperature. Now, the second takeaway is something Bill O'Reilly pointed out. Kamala Harris is never going to back down from that rhetoric because it's their strength. Painting Trump as an unhinged, power-hungry dictator who wants to destroy democracy has worked for them before. They push these extreme ideas about Trump, none of which are true, but it worked in 2020. Whether you believe they cheated or not, they got the result they wanted. But here's the problem. What worked in 2020 may not work now. Back then, we didn't have the inflation crisis, men competing in women's sports, an open border with millions of illegal migrants, or the high level of children being indoctrinated in schools. We didn't have the aggressive third trimester abortion push either. The issues we're dealing with today are very different, and the Democrats' old strategy may not fly in this election. Lastly, I think people like Cenk Uygur show signs of Trump Derangement Syndrome. What's really telling is how someone can let another political figure control their emotions so much. I mean, what does it say about someone who loses all sense of rationality at the mere mention of Trump's name? That's not about Trump. It's about the person who can't handle it. So those are my thoughts. Candace Owens handled it calmly and backed up her points with facts. But what do you guys think? I want to hear your thoughts about this debate between Candace and Cenk, the points I made, and even Bill O'Reilly's take. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to help it grow.